One major storm moves out, but fear not, or maybe fear. Second major storm coming right behind it, and it's going to play out in much the same way. And after that goes by, winter will be overspreading much of the United States, and that's going to take us through much of next week. We'll talk about all of that and talk about last night right here on tonight's Joe and Joe Weather Show podcast, which, of course, is brought to you by our affiliate, Tempest by Weatherflow. Get the revolutionary Tempest weather system. Join the fastest growing observing weather network on the planet. The link is pinned in the descriptor to this video. And whatever you decide to purchase, be it the weather station or anything else on the Tempest website, use the coupon code I want fear. Whoops. Second, hold on. Nothing. My fault. Use the coupon code I want a weather station, and if you do, you'll get.
Well, I hope you'll get 10% off.
Yes.
In spite of the technical difficulties.
Yeah, no, I left open the actual show and I just closed it, so we're fine. All right. Welcome to tonight's Joe and Joe Weather Show podcast, and welcome to everybody on the chat board, and a number of you who are new to the chat board, welcome as well. And to those of you who are lurking in the background, as some people tend to do, make sure you subscribe to my YouTube channel so you don't miss us. We're on Sunday through Thursday at 7:35. However, we will be on Friday, this coming Friday at 7:35 p.m. So mark it down and turn your notifications on so you don't miss us. And if you like the show, please hit the like button, because Joe and I love it when we go over 100 likes or 200 likes or however many hundred likes we get. I think this storm, I'm just trying to think back. I can't remember a storm in recent years producing the kind of widespread damage that this did, from Florida all the way up to New England. I mean, it was just insane. Some of the things I saw, including apparently a busted dam in Connecticut that's flooding areas around Norwich. The coastal flooding, Joe, was both on Long Island and in New Jersey. Was I don't know if was substantial. Let's put it that way. And in some places, it was even more than just substantial. So this storm was something else. It really was.
Well, we told everybody, excuse me, in advance of the winter system that we had over the weekend. We said, yeah, it'll be the first time some of you will see significant snow, but it's the second system, the one that we had last night, that we were more concerned about, and it certainly turned out every bit like that. You just mentioned, Joe, from New Jersey. You know, the most interesting thing I thought was the squall line.
That squall line was insane. That was just insane.
It was developing as we were coming to the end of our show last night with Dave Tolerous coming on in the final few minutes. The interesting thing, though, to me was that when I went to the GOES 16 view, which usually shows convection and thunderstorms or lightning,
right,
there was absolutely nothing with that squall line. I mean, it was a narrow, sharp line. It was very deep shade of red. You would figure that, oh my goodness, we're going to see a lot of lightning, a lot of thunder, low top convection, maybe nothing on the GOES 16 indicating that there was any kind of. And I was listening last night for some rumbles of thunder.
Nothing.
Or looking, nothing.
But it was quite the gust front.
Oh yeah.
It was quite the gust front. And the models did pick up on it the day before. I remember looking at the NAM 3 kilometer, and it sort of looked like that there was a second front boundary that was going to come through.
The HRR, in the final hours leading up to the actual passage through the tri-state area, the NAM, the GFS, they had like precipitation like splattered all over the place.
Right.
The only one that really showed any kind of a line similar to what we were seeing on the actual radar with the DBZ indicating that, again, that deep, not convection necessarily, but that deep shade of red, which indicated some, heavy precipitation, was the HRRR. So we bashed the Ace Triple R a lot, but last night for a few hours it was sitting all alone in its glory and forecasting and predicting this line.
Well, that model's supposed to be good at picking up on stuff like that.
Yeah.
You
Well, it
know,
did last
it
night.
did last night. Well, broken clocks are right twice a day, Joe. So maybe that was the twice a day. David Fuller bangs the tip jar early. Thank you, David. Thanks for hitting super chat. Lost power 3 times last night for a minute each time. Crazy wind, 72-mile-an-hour gust by Seaside on my radar scope map. Yes, Island Beach State Park in New Jersey, Joe, gusted to 72. And I saw a number of reports with gusts in the 50s and 60s. Now here's the thing for Friday, for the Friday storm, and I was looking at some of the guidance with regards to the wind speeds, which are lower than what they were with the system last night. On the other hand, they're still bringing winds up into the 40 to 55 mile an hour range in terms of gusts, and who knows, maybe there'll be the odd gust to 60, but everything is so compromised right now with all the rain, the river flooding, the snow melt. Uh, the ground has got to be so incredibly soft and saturated that even though we'll probably wind up with a little less, I don't think we're going to get 3-inch rainfall amounts this time around. But we still could certainly get every bit of an inch to an inch and a half, inch and 3/4, and that might be enough to set these rivers going all over the place and flooding, in a lot of a lot of vulnerable places and even some normally unvulnerable places.
Well, I think I agree with you in the sense that we're not going to see what we saw last night with this next system, at least in terms of precipitation. I think if you picked up 3 inches of rain out of last night's system, just as an example, I think with the next system coming in for Friday night late into Saturday morning, probably more closer to 1 inch as opposed to three. And the winds, well, yeah, the winds were gusting in some places upwards to over 60 miles per hour if you were along the south shore of Long Island or the Jersey Shore. But I think this time around, this go around, we're probably going to be seeing winds gusting more like maybe 35 or 40 miles per hour. Now, 35 to 40 mile an hour wind gusts and 1+ inch of rain, that's a fairly formidable storm system. But again, when you compare it to the hellacious conditions that many of you went through last night, it's going to be quite a bit less than what
Well,
we.
I just want to be a little bit careful because I don't the gradient is tight. The high to the east this time around is a little weaker. The low this time around is a little deeper. Maybe we won't have all that convective stuff going on tomorrow. Maybe we will. I don't know. I can imagine that there might be the odd thunderstorm around. I'm not expecting another one of those squall lines. Not this far north. But either way, it's gonna be rough for Friday night and into daybreak Saturday in some places. It should end. It's another one of these 6 to 8 hour periods where it's going to be crazy or semi crazy, and it is going to turn significantly colder over the weekend.
100, Joe. Actually, it's 102 now.
Okay, it is going
We're
to.
getting to 100 now, almost nightly now in the first 10 minutes of the show. It's
Works
amazing.
works for me. After this, unlike this particular storm, after this one, the second one goes by, it is going to get colder over the weekend and into the first part of next week.
Yeah, we still have to take down here at Shea Rayo. We still have to take down Christmas decorations outside. And what I'm thinking of is tomorrow.
Just let the wind take them down for you.
No. Mrs. Rayo and I will spend the morning taking down the rope lights, which we wrap around our light poles, and of course also the giant snowflakes on the maple tree and the lights on the dogwood tree. And then I'm thinking, Joe, that on Saturday, the first half of the day will be rather mild. We'll probably have temperature just like we saw today. My high temperature today was 55 at 2
Oh,
o'clock.
yeah, there was no cold air behind this thing.
Right. So I still think we're going to have temperatures in the low 50s to kick off the day on Saturday. So maybe if I get out early enough and get the 15-foot ladder up, I'll be able to go up to the roof and take down the lights that go around the top of the house. Because by later in the day on Saturday, it will indeed be trending much colder, and we probably will finish out Saturday. We'll start the day on Saturday, I think, at like 52 or 54. We'll finish the day on Saturday about 10 or 12 degrees colder than that. And you're right; it looks like it's going to get quite a bit colder as we move on into next week.
Jess Harden, your local meteorologist out of Birmingham, Alabama, about the deep freeze. Yes, definitely. In fact, I was looking at some of the digital numbers for me, Joe, next week. I've got 2 days with temperatures down close to 12, which ought to be fun. Because when it gets cold up here, it gets cold. I mean, you're in the mountains. I'm sorry. When you're up in elevation, it's not the same as being at sea level. You could have the same temperature and same everything else, but for some reason, it just feels that much colder up here. But yeah, you are going to get it. I think actually, Jess, I think you may get some snow on Monday when that system starts to roll around. But we'll talk about that.
And
But
and in football, the wild card game coming up this weekend, the Dolphins versus the Chiefs, could very well be among the coldest games in the history of the NFL. They're talking about for this game. I don't know how many of you are. Well, I know a lot of you are football fans. The high temperature. The game is going to be played in Kansas City on Saturday night at Arrowhead Stadium. And the high temperature in Kansas City on Saturday is expected to be only 11 degrees during the day.
well, if I remember the Giants Packers, the
Right.
infamous Ice Bowl, I think it was I think it was low single digits or even below zero during that game. So
Well, this is going to be that was a night game, and this is going to be a night game too. It's
right.
expected by the time the game kicks off at 7 p.m. Central Time, the temperature is going to be at or just below 0 Fahrenheit, and it's expected to continue to dip well down below zero once the sun sets. The low temperature is expected to be sub-zero. It's expected to be sub-zero for quite a few nights in the Kansas City area, and I made the comment on my Facebook page. Of course, Taylor Swift is dating one of the players on the Kansas City team, and I said, "Big question: will Taylor Swift show up for this game?" And one person on my Facebook page wrote back and said, "Taylor could easily buy a dome for them before the game."
True. That is true. Well, Joe, it's a good thing that we talked about this tonight because, as we know, Taylor Swift does watch the Joe and Joe Weather Show Sunday through Thursday at 7:35 p.m. and she probably will be watching this Friday because we will be on this Friday as a reminder. Winter storm watches are up across parts of Nebraska. Winter storm warnings have already gone up for eastern Nebraska and western Missouri. We've got watches for Iowa, northern Illinois, including Chicago. I think Chicago could wind up with a foot out of this, and on up into
And
Wisconsin.
near blizzard conditions too, probably.
Yes, and near blizzard conditions, and also for much of the lower peninsula of Michigan. I'm just going to give you a quick, interesting stat about Chicago, is that from 1979, in 1979, Chicago had this big snowstorm that produced, I don't know, whatever it was, 18 inches. Let's just pull a number out of the hat. It was over a foot and a half, all the rest of it. Just so that you snow lovers can feel better about the fact that there hasn't been that the snow, the winters the last few years have been subpar. Chicago went, believe it or not, 18 years between 10-inch plus snowstorms. 1979, the next one didn't happen until 1997. Chicago's not really known for getting super big storms like we do on the East Coast, but they do get a lot of small and medium-sized storms. So their snowfall annual snowfall normals are higher than what New York is, for what New York is. But still, just in terms of big storms, and a foot or more in Chicago is not something that happens all that often.
Correct.
Right? Because
Correct.
they don't have an ocean. Okay, and these storms are usually moving along at a clip. So anyway, the first watches are up. We also have the first flood watches up for much of Massachusetts and northern Connecticut. I believe those are flood watches. Sometimes I can't tell the colors on these Weather Service maps because different offices use slightly different shades. Yes, those are flood watches up for much of Massachusetts and for Connecticut. And then you might be saying, well, how come Western Connecticut is not in it? Why is not Southern Connecticut? Well, that's the responsibility of another office. That's the Northwest Connecticut is Albany's responsibility, and Southern Connecticut is Upton's responsibility, so they probably figured, you know what, we'll wait till tomorrow morning because it's only Wednesday night, so let's wait till tomorrow to put up the flood watches, or whatever. All right, out in the west, as the energy of that storm is dropping southeastward, you could see loads of winter weather advisories and winter storm warnings up in Idaho, western Montana, western Wyoming, and the Wasatch County in one county in Nevada that's under a winter storm warning. The Sierra Nevadas are under winter storm warnings, and so are the Cascades. I'm just interested in what that purple color is in that one county. What is that? Oh, a snow squall warning. Oh, okay. That's 2 nights in a row, Joe, that we've seen snow squall warnings out in that part of the world. So uh, they've got winter there too. And actually, when you think about the kind of month December was, with the total lack of snow, not just here in eastern Pennsylvania to southern New England, it was virtually the whole country hardly got any snow during the month of December. So now we're lighting up the maps like a Christmas tree, and the pattern is extremely active. So we've gone from one extreme to another, and now we're just going to keep moving forward to see where this little adventure takes us. Some areas in southwest Texas and in South Texas have high wind. The gold is high wind warnings. No, high wind watches. I'm sorry. You see what I mean, Joe? The dark gold, the gold that's in South Texas is slightly darker than the gold that's in West Texas, but that's just one color, and that's the only color that they have in gold. I guess maybe, hold on. I stand corrected. So it's a high wind watch in South Texas. High wind warnings are up in Southwest Texas and in southern New Mexico. Our wind advisories are gone, but they're going to come back. And wouldn't shock me if the Weather Service put up a high wind watch for the coastal areas. But you know what? That's their job, not mine. So we'll see how that goes. And here's the latest satellite loop as we give it a quick refresh and let it load. At least you broke out into a little bit of sun today, and now the winds are starting to ease a bit. Still got a lot of clouds, though, back to the lakes. And then, of course, you've got that energy now, this blossoming area of bright white clouds from Idaho westward across Nevada. That is part of that energy that's going to head down into the southern plains and set off the next low that is going to be our major storm going to the Great Lakes.
And that would be storm number 3. But now,
Right.
now numerically now with these things, we had the storm 1 was over this weekend. This was storm 2 last night. Storm 3 for Friday night, and then I know a couple of people, like for example Jeff Yingst. That's a new name. Haven't seen that on the chat board, but he did hit the tip jar. Thank you very much, Jeff. Asking about, I've been hearing talk about a storm on Tuesday. Well, that could be storm number 4, and could turn out to be a wintry storm, but we'll get into that, I'm sure, in the next few minutes.
Right. And well, anyway, let's look at the radar and see what's going on tonight. So we do have a little bit of snow happening across Iowa and into northwestern Illinois. If you noticed on the satellite, I didn't really point it out, but there was a swirl there. There's a little system that's sort of moving along, and that's going to run across the lakes and then pass by to our north probably during the day tomorrow. In the east, it's fairly quiet. We've got some moisture coming in off the lakes in upstate New York. Otherwise, the radars are dry, and thankfully so. And then, of course, you see out in the west, there's that snow squall warning in the purple, as you got that dark green stripe that is heading southeastward for that particular county in Nevada. And also some snow up around Salt Lake City in northern Utah. And you've got rain at the coast, immediate coast, and snow not that far inland in parts of northern California into southern Oregon and also in the Sierra Nevadas. Now, WPC. So here's the rainfall forecast from WPC. Ooh, they just kind of added another little area there. I did a refresh, Joe, and they added they 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 expanded slightly the area of 1.5 inches plus. They must have just heard us at the very beginning of our program. As we know, those little lurkers. I mean, seriously, you think it's a coincidence? We talked about this just a few minutes ago, and suddenly they refreshed their zero Z map that was issued, I don't know, about an hour or so ago. Um,
I, well,
we love you, WPC. Don't get us wrong. 1.5 inches plus. Northern New Jersey, small portion of northeastern Pennsylvania, Connecticut, Rhode Island, and parts of Massachusetts, and also a little bubble there up in the Catskills. But again, less than what we saw with yesterday's storm. And then, of course, you've got this stripe of 1.5 inches of liquid that runs up through northeast Arkansas, southeast Missouri, and northward up into the southern parts of Lake Michigan, southwest Michigan, and northeastern Illinois around the Chicago area. So I don't know if that's all going to fall as snow there, but the vast majority of it will. But I'm pretty confident that they're going to wind up with close to a foot, if not over a foot. And then you see the activity's pretty heavy in the Pacific Northwest. Aaron Yonkers drums. 50-mile-an-hour winds plus lake effect snow for the Bills game. Yeah, there it is. And you're from Canada. Thank you for hitting Super Chat. Uh, Thank you very much. And welcome to the Joe and Joe Weather Show. We should mention precip up in the Toronto area. We have a lot, Joe, believe it or not, we have a few regulars here and I found this out, but there are some people from Toronto that watch the show. So we're going to make it a special point to highlight
I,
the fact that they're going to get a 3/4 of an inch to an inch of liquid equivalent up there. So you've got more snow on the way for you.
I love Toronto. I've only been to Toronto once. Fernando and I were there for our honeymoon back in 1984. Would love to be able to get back there for whatever reason sometime in the future. Beautiful city, and of course that beautiful CN Tower, which is at least at the time when we were there, it was the tallest freestanding structure in North America. I think now, and in the world, but now I think it's dropped to like sixth or seventh or whatever. But in any case, love to go back to Toronto. Thank you so much for those of you who are watching from the Toronto area. It's again, and you're going to get your fair share of weather as well in the coming days ahead.
WPC's probability for at least 4. We went from barely using this map in the month of December, and normally we start off with the probability of at least 2, but we're getting enough winter weather now of quality, essentially, so we could go with the probability of at least 4. And if you use the 50% line, which I often like to use that as a forecast tool, you're talking northern Missouri, central Illinois, much of the northern Indiana, even into northwest Ohio. There's a high probability for 4. And then you head onto the Canada side of Lake Erie. You also have a rather high probability of at least 4. And this whole area of red that's in eastern Iowa, Wisconsin, northern Illinois, northeastward across much of Michigan, that is a 95 to 100% probability for at least 4. And then we've got the west, where it's been busy as well, and you see it in western Colorado, much of Utah, much of Idaho, much of Oregon, except the coast, but actually there will be some on the northwest coast, and on up through all of the Cascades and the Sierra Nevadas. Very, very active indeed. And I don't want to leave this out because this was such a big deal yesterday. But let's go to SPC, Storm Prediction Center, with regards to severe weather because it sets up pretty much the same way. They've got a slight risk of severe weather for tomorrow for eastern Texas, much of Louisiana, southwest Mississippi, and a good chunk of Arkansas. And that is a 5% tornado risk. With the past storm, they actually had a 10% tornado risk. We'll see what they do in the morning. And they've already bit the bullet here for Friday into Saturday morning, where they've got a large area of slight risk from southeast Louisiana and much of Mississippi, Alabama, then swinging all the way up to a very small portion of south central Virginia, and enhanced risk of severe weather for pretty much the same places yesterday: eastern Alabama, central and south Georgia, much of South Carolina, and a small portion of southwestern North Carolina. I mean, but this time around, Joe, notice this time around they actually pushed the general thunderstorm line much
Right.
further north. I'll tell you this much. Now, this is one thing that we got to be a little careful of, is that there's no snow cover this time, and the snow cover might have, you know, get that inversion that's oftentimes keeps the strongest winds from mixing all the way down. I don't think you're going to have that problem this time around. So, that might argue for the idea that, looking at the guidance, that the winds may be more on the higher end than on the lower end of the guidance. Uh, Now, I also noticed that on the digital forecast, they were pushing temperatures up perhaps near 60 for early Saturday, during the overnight hours, Friday night into Saturday morning. I don't
Well,
think.
that's what I was alluding to a few minutes ago, saying that Saturday may kick off on a mild note, and maybe that's when I'll, you know, take down the last of the lights while it's still relatively mild. But it is going to turn much colder later in the day on Saturday, and by Sunday we'll be pretty much into winter, Joe.
Yeah, it just reminded me. Do you remember when we had that moron that that was on the? We had that moron who said that I said something to the effect of that it was something like this, where it was going to rise up above 60 or into the 60s or something, and he said that that was impossible. That could never possibly happen. Um, and he just made such a big deal over it. For some reason, that came floating back into my memory. Why, I don't know, but
You know,
it did.
my sister had a chance to get a job. This goes back many years ago. Children's Television Workshop, which of course creators of Sesame Street. So it was a big thing, and they gave her a task. They said write a kind of a crazy, weird type of story, and she did. She wrote a story. I think it involved like Cookie Monster or some of the other characters of Sesame Street, where it was bright and sunny one day, and then the next day there was lots of snow falling. And when she handed that in, the person who was in charge told her, basically, he said, "What are you, crazy?" I said, we want something weird, but we don't want something that can never happen." And she
Oh,
got
good
all upset.
God.
I got all upset. I said, "Send him over to me. I'll tell him that that has happened on more than one occasion." Of course, we have seen in recent years in Denver and a number of other places. Right here in New York, we had a day where it was very warm, and then the next day we had blizzard conditions. So you can get those crazy swings of weather. Um, as weird as they seem to be.
Yep. Well, here we go again. So here, I've rolled the upper air back to Sunday, so you could see the trough in the east that made we had the weekend system, the Saturday Sunday system, and that rolled out, and then of course we get into this ridge position. And now here was the Tuesday storm, that deep upper low lifted up to the Great Lakes and then headed up into southeastern Canada. That low, by the way, this first storm, if you look at the upper air feature, it just kind of disappears. Okay, and I want you to just bear that in mind, because now we've got the next one. Now there's a short wave here. This is the system I pointed out that had that little snow up there in the upper Mississippi Valley. And then of course you've got the main energy that's way back here, and then there's some northern energy that's getting involved too. So I'm going to move this along, and there you see that trough drops down into Kansas and Oklahoma, and then it phases and cuts off with the energy that's dropping down between Great Slave Lake and Lake Winnipeg. So you've got this massive tilted, negatively tilted trough with a strong upper air cyclone that develops over the Great Lakes, and the surface cyclone is going to be pretty much vertical with that upper air cyclone. So you're going to have a real animal here that's going to run up to the Great Lakes, and of course we're getting this strong southerly flow ahead of it, which sets us up much like we had for yesterday and last night. But going back to what I said about that first system, last night's system just sort of fading in the upper air, this one does not. And that's really important because this is what finally finishes off this long 3 week period where we've been watching the pattern just grindingly, slow grind toward changing from what it was in December. That upper low is going to just actually winds up strengthening and then rotating back westward. And that's what ultimately puts us in a cold flow from Canada. So I'm just moved it up to Tuesday here. And, you can see where the upper air winds are coming out of Canada and going, right into not just the eastern part of the United States, but it's pretty much everywhere east of the Rockies. This was critical, Joe, to happen because if that upper low, if this storm for Friday were not to do that, if it were to run away to the east, then we'd be, back, we'd be pretty much doing the same old story. But this is a very important change in the upper air pattern across North America that's going to dictate the weather going forward, at least for the next maybe 10 days or so.
I think you're absolutely right. This is the pattern changer. This is the thing that we've been seeing since mid or late December. All right, we're putting off the wave of cold weather for another day or another week or whatever like that. But this setup, this scenario coming our way this weekend is going to be the thing that's going to finally open the door to the Arctic and set the stage for for all of you out there who've been saying, where's the wintry weather? Where's the cold air? Where's it? Well, I hope you're happy because you're going to get it next week.
All right, so a few people were talking about the possibility of maybe some snow, and I'll get to that on the models in a second, but there's a couple of things I want to also point out here. So early next week, we do have a short wave that's going to be actually a couple of short waves, but we do have a short wave that's going to be swinging around underneath that upper low, and that might create a chance for some snow. I don't think this sets up as anything sizable, okay? And because a few of you are already throwing, snowstorm word around, and in my mind, if a snowstorm to me is something that gives you widespread areas that get a foot plus. I'm not.
But I've been seeing people on social media who have been talking about this scenario coming up for Tuesday as the first real significant I-95 snowstorm threat in a long time. But I'm trying to see that.
If significant is an inch, okay, then it's significant. But I want to be careful here because there's a lot of things that are going on, and one of them is the fact that if it's a good solid shortwave, in my mind, as I was looking at this thing today, I'm thinking, you know what, this could wind up being maybe a 2 to 4, 3 to 6 type snowfall, something that runs right along, up along the coast and just inland of the coast, something like that. But I don't think it's going to be any, if everything were to maybe play, if I hate to use the phrase everything fall into place, but I think if you have the right setup, maybe it could be like a 3 to 6er. I just don't see it being something more than that. And frankly, I also could see a scenario where this upper trough is so broad that you wind up not getting very much out of this. And it's only maybe a coating or an inch or two, if that.
It's weird. I did take a peek at the forecasts from Albany and also for New York for next week. Albany has no mention whatsoever of any kind of precipitation. And New York City has a mention of either showers of rain or wet snow. They don't really talk very much. I think, if we did get anything, it might be like late Monday or into early Tuesday. And I think actually it might be cold enough throughout the atmosphere to allow for snow, but I don't see yet what some are talking about, saying that, oh, this is the perfect setup for a real significant, like 4 or 6 inch snowfall for all of I-95. I don't see that yet.
You have to get everything to be correct. You'd have to get everything to line up just right. Well, you always have to get everything to line up just right, but you really do. And you're not gonna. I'm not seeing it either. Not at this early stage. The other thing I wanted to point out is something that the GFS did today, and this alludes to uh, what Dave Tollers was talking about, maybe for the end of next week, which would be around the 19th, 20th. Uh, and the GFS today on the upper air drops this big cutoff low during that time frame, the 19th, 20th, across the Great Lakes and into New England. And actually, the European did the same thing and makes a pretty big storm out in the ocean. Okay, it brings some snow here to eastern Pennsylvania to southern New England and points southward, but it develops a big offshore low out at like 40 and 65. Now, again, we're talking 10 days out here, but I did notice this, just to go back to um, Dr. Judah Cohen and that tweet, Joe. Remember that tweet
Oh,
about
about the fact that he's going to be away next week.
No, 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 no. About the Arctic oscillation going from a deeply negative number to
Right.
and a rapid ascent to neutral. Well,
Right.
right now we are at 2.5 standard deviations away from the mean, negative, and you'll notice on the Arctic oscillation chart here that uh, after the 15th it starts to really accelerate up toward that neutral line, which would be right around that weekend. And that, Dr. Judah Cohen pointed out in his tweet that and this is quite true, in instances when the AO goes from a deeply negative number on the index and climbs rapidly to the neutral line, that's telling you that there's a big pressure pattern change occurring across the northern hemisphere, and that is oftentimes a very good signal for an offshore nor'easter slash ocean storm. So that might be something to start. We'll watch to see if it comes to that. Just because you get that spike up in the Arctic oscillation going from -2 to 0 is there doesn't necessarily translate into a guarantee of anything. But I just found it interesting that we have this on the AO, and then I looked at the models today. Again, both the GFS and the European show that idea of something maybe substantial developing in about in 10 days from now. But
So it's not as some may be hoping for. It's not the Tuesday event,
no,
but it may be more like a week from this Friday event that might be worthwhile watching and seeing what develops out of that.
Friday and Saturday. I mean, not that Tuesday's not it's important to an extent, but I think if you're looking for the potential for something to be um, stronger, I would just pay attention. And again, nothing may come of it. So let's just put it. We'll put it out there, and we'll visit it again tomorrow, and we'll visit it the next day, and we'll see what happens. And yes, Peter Bicker, the ensembles are also showing it. So there's that. All right. So we
Watch. By the way, Tom Contino, no, the person on the chat board, Bobby Rayo, is not a nephew. This person has always been coming on and saying that there's a relationship there, that he's related to me.
is
He is not related to me.
is he on the board now?
He's on the board now,
Well, where is he?
and now he's also claiming now, Joe, that he's a degreed meteorologist. And I,
Well,
you know,
you know something, Joe.
yeah.
Um, I'm going to claim that he is now banned from this channel,
Oh,
so he's gone. So,
so
uh,
they,
so there you
they,
go. So you know what, Bobby Rayo? Why don't you go start your own YouTube channel, since you are a meteorologist, as you say, and this way you can devote your time and energy to what you have, and not waste your time, you know, with the Philistines that are here. Okay. Uh, so there you go.
You
Um,
get Jeffrey Mayer, LMAAO, Joe.
right. Yeah, I don't like to do that. I really don't. Yeah, I mean, you really have to push. You have to really push my buttons to get there. But I have to tell you, you're the second person. That's the second person in the last 6 weeks that I've banned off the channel, and it feels so darn good. So anyway, here's our storm for today. That's up in Maine, or at least it was up in Maine. Now moving away. The weak disturbance moving across Iowa and Illinois. That's got brings some little bit of snow up in western and New York and northwest PA. That goes out, and of course your western energy, which is ample, gets down to a 96 low in North Texas by early Friday morning, 1 a.m. Friday. It's just to the west of Tulsa as a 96. Moves into central Missouri. You see the developing and expanding area of snow and the darker blue heavy snow. By the time it gets to southeast of Chicago on the Indiana side, Joe, it's a 976. And then it's a 972 in southwestern Michigan. And of course, you see how you see what's happening here in the east, where we've got an expanding area of rain, and we
200.
thank you. Thank you for those of you who have hit the like button to get us to 200 likes. So we got this expanding area of rain again. It really plays out much the same way. And the other thing is, we have to be a little careful, is that the GFS is suddenly expanding this heavy rain area here uh, between 1 a.m. and say 4 a.m., something like that. Northern New Jersey, especially for southern and southeastern New England. So that maybe that's why Boston saw jump already has put up the flood watches with when they saw this. So there's that, and then that goes out. Gradient's pretty tight on Saturday, Joe. It's going to still blow away on Saturday, but just from the west at probably 40 mile an hour plus wind gusts, and then we go through the weekend. Now here comes that low for on Monday, which moves across the southern states. You see that area of snow in Arkansas and Tennessee kind of pushes up into West Virginia. And then you get a coastal low that develops. It's not very strong. It's just a 10, 12 low, a wave on an old Arctic boundary that winds up going northeast. So yeah, I mean, could you get a few inches out of this? Sure. Could you get more than say 4 or 5? If and this would have to work out perfectly again for
You'd have
that
to
to
slow
happen.
it down a little bit.
Yeah,
Moving pretty quick.
yeah, and then it goes out, and then of course we've got plenty of cold air all over the place, and more coming as we move
The
through
one thing I
next
would
week.
want, the one thing I would want out of that system would be I'm getting really sick. The last couple of years, Joe, the big storms, the small storms that I've gotten up here where I live in Putnam Valley. I mean, they've been heavy, wet snows. They have been tough to move with a shovel. The consistency is it's not like a 10-1. It's more like a 8-1 or 7-1. I'm yearning for a snowfall, puffy, powdery, low density snow, which would be easy to move around with a snowblower and easy to shovel. Haven't seen that a lot of in recent years, and maybe just maybe we'll get enough cold air to allow for a puffier type of snow. If not for the one on Tuesday, maybe for the one at the end of the week.
Right. Well, I'm going to get some. I may get some snow out of this on Monday night. By the way, I had some. I had a little bit of snow last night. The north side of town. Uh, if you drove about 15 miles to the toward the north side of town, they got about a coat. They got about a half an inch to an inch. But it was the wind was the wrong direction. It was a west southwest wind, which is for where I am and where I'm situated in the mountains is not good. I'm shielded essentially. I'm in one of those shadow areas when it's a southwest wind. I need a northwest wind to do it, or a north or even a northeast wind. And this has given me it's bringing snow to Alabama and northern Mississippi and Alabama and northern Georgia come Monday into Monday night. Fingers crossed, and then up through the Central Appalachians. Then that goes away, and then We get to the end of next week, and you'll notice that there's a low that drops down from western Canada to Montana, kind of moves eastward, and then there's a little, lower pressures off the southeast and into the Gulf of Mexico. And the GFS did form a low southeast of Cape Cod. Not much of one, but it did. This is for Saturday the 20th, and then it moves along and deepens as it heads up towards Nova Scotia. It was the European that wound up showing, like it had a 9, I don't know, what was it, a 9? I might as well look at it. Hold on. Let's get the 12Z European up. 12Z European, please. Okay. We'll use the Eastern view. And by the way, this is just this is liquid precip. It doesn't show frozen or non-frozen precipitation. So don't get upset when you see the green in the colder air. It's just he doesn't have the frozen option. So here's your Tuesday storm on the European, which was a little further out to the east and a little bit of a colder run, but still produced several inches or more of snow in its run. And then toward the end of the period, there it is. You get it's a 981 low, well southeast of Cape Cod and south of Nova Scotia. And it actually did give the ensembles and the operational did actually give a few inches of snow out of this, but it does all the development offshore. But again, that would be something to watch after we get through Friday's storm and after we get through whatever we get early next week, which is no guarantee that we'll get anything at all.
And there's never a guarantee.
No, there isn't.
No.
No, there isn't.
I said the opening salvo back in October was don't trust anything beyond 4 or 5 days. And here we are now speculating on something that might happen.
But it's perfectly fine to speculate if you do it in context and you're not doing it where you're screaming at the top of your lungs as if it's certitude. That's what we do. This is it was a channel about weather. We should be able to intelligently speculate about things without necessary setting off alarm bells. Of course, we can't control how people interpret things, because I'm sure there will be somebody that'll be watching the show tonight and saying, did you hear that Joe and Joe on the Joe and Joe weather show that's on every Sunday through Thursday at 7:35 p.m. that they're saying that there's going to be this huge snowstorm on the weekend of the 20th? I'm sure somebody's going to walk away with that, with that idea in their head, even though we didn't say that. Okay. So there.
So there.
So I don't know about you, Joe, but I know what did we have, Sunday off? I'm sorry, it just didn't feel like we had Sunday off. So for me, it's like we've been going nonstop now for the better part of 9 days. So, and our shows have been going over an hour. So being that we are now not even to 8:30 yet, it's 8:23. I'm going to say we can put an end to the show now.
Good night.
And say good night. And then this way tomorrow, and we have the Friday show this week. Okay.
Right.
So.
Right.
All right. So we're going to call it quits for tonight, folks. We're done.
And we want to thank David Fuller, Brandon Doherty, Jeff Yingst, and Aaron Yonkers Drums for hitting super chats tonight. And thank you all for not putting us over 300 likes, because we're cutting the show a little short, but we still managed to get 230 likes as of right now, and that's pretty darn good.
And the Joe and Joe Weather Show podcast is brought to you by Tempest by WeatherFlow. Get the revolutionary Tempest weather system and join the fastest growing observing weather network on the planet. The link is pinned to the top of the chat board. It's also on the descriptor to this video. Use the coupon code I want a weather station if you make any purchases, and if you do, you will get
10% off.
All right, everybody. Great that you were here tonight. I know we're going to see most of you here tomorrow night, so have a great one. Stay safe. We'll see you tomorrow. Night, night.
Bye, folks.